spaces, and other structures and facilities essential for citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Lincoln to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2025 marks the 65th annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Week Association. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of Lincoln do hereby designate the week May 18th through 24th, 2025 as National Public Works Week. Urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies and activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals to recognize the substantial contributions that they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life.
Thank you. So before we move any further, can I have a motion to accept this proclamation?
So moved.
Seconded? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Pearl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Reedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Eklund,
Yes.
Mayor Andriata.
Yes.
And I would ask one additional thing. We actually had a coloring contest in our Public Works Department, and 3 young individuals that participated and won prizes in that contest are here, and I wanted to ask them to share in the photo op with the city council and showcase their work in front
That would be awesome.
for the photo.
So who are your winners?
So the winners are Kodiak, he got first place, Hannah was second place, and Fallon was in third place, and they'll all bring their artwork up
Awesome.
with their parents and
Congratulations.
relatives. Would you guys join us up front? Yeah.
No, Madam Mayor, while we're getting organized again, I'd just like to say that the Public Works Department and all their personnel, I mean, they're the unsung heroes of the city. People look at the police and fire, but when you want to turn on your water or flush things away or drive on roads, those are the people that make it happen. So you guys are rock stars, without a doubt.
Absolutely. Well, and also, they're not necessarily listed when the Safe Cities report comes out, you know, and we're ranked high as the safest city. People usually look at crime and fire prevention, all that. But the Public Works is included in that as well, because they keep the streets clean, they keep things safe and moving, and the utilities pumping. And so we recognize all of them. So thank you very much for what you guys do. Appreciate that. All right, item 9B, Pioneer Community Energy new programs.
Good afternoon, Mayor Andriata,
Hi.
Lincoln City Council. My name is Jake Trumbull. I'm here on behalf of Pioneer Community Energy to provide an update on the many exciting programs we are offering our customers in the service area. As a reminder, Pioneer supplies the electricity indicated as generation on a customer bill, but gas, transmission, and distribution services all still come from PG&E. Pioneer is the locally owned, not-for-profit electricity provider serving El Dorado and Placer counties, the cities of Auburn, Colfax, Grass Valley, Lincoln, Nevada City, Placerville, Rockland, and the town of Loomis. As many are aware, energy costs, including generation, are rising across the board. That's why Pioneer has reaffirmed its #1 priority, saving customers money. In fact, Pioneer site saved ratepayers $108 million since launching in 2018. An additional $31 million is planned in savings for 2025. In Lincoln specifically, customers have saved $10.1 million through 2024. Last summer and again in December, our governing board, which is comprised of representatives from each of our member agencies, currently including Councilmember Pearl, approved rate cuts for our customers. For 2025, Pioneer's rates are an average of 10% lower for residents and businesses when compared to PG&E's generation portion of the bill. In addition to competitive rates, Pioneer has launched a series of money-saving programs created based on the feedback from our Community Advisory Committee, which allows customers input into the programs we select. These programs include GridGen, which offers zero down, no credit check for solar plus battery or battery retrofits on homes. We partner with local retailers to provide steep discounts on LED lighting and energy-efficient products, including both Dollar Trees here in Lincoln. We offer a $75 rebate for customers who tune up their air conditioner, and we also offer the Power Shift program, which incentivizes curbing energy use when the power grid is stressed. Pioneer in the coming year or two will be allocating finances to local microgrids that support critical needs of vulnerable populations most likely impacted by outages. This is just another avenue that Pioneer continues to reinvest in the communities we serve. Another Pioneer offering is field days, which are open to all customers to assist with any bill-related questions. These field days are hosted in many of the communities we serve, so please check out our events page on the Pioneer website or visit our Facebook page for more information on upcoming locations and dates. I have left flyers with Hope that will be available on the first floor of the building that highlight our residential and business programs. So we encourage all of our customers to take advantage of these programs, and we are committed to providing customers with competitive rates, exceptional local customer service, and a choice of energy options. For more information, please visit us at pioneercommunityenergy.org. Pioneercommunityenergy.org.
Great, thank you, Jay, appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Great presentation. Questions or comments?
I'm a Pioneer customer and I love it.
We love having you.
Well, it's nice to get money back or save money for doing absolutely nothing. So that's good. But I'm now on their board since January, and this is a very professionally run organization. I mean, it is a pleasure, to work with them. They know exactly what they're doing. And in addition, they are looking to the future to be of great service to the communities that they serve. And over the next 2 years, they're going to be onboarding, about 40%, I think, increase in customer base.
Yeah,
So
you're
it's a
expanding
huge
quite a
expansion
bit
that we're
from-
talking about, which is going to help to lower all of our rates as we get larger.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Pearl.
Thank you very much. It's a presentation, so we don't necessarily have to, but is there anybody in the audience would like to make a comment on this? Anybody on Zoom? Okay. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
Have a good day.
thank you so much.
All right, item 10, public comment on non-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. This is the opportunity where you'll have a chance to make a public comment to the council on an item that is not already on our agenda, and you have 3 minutes. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a public comment? Anybody on Zoom? No? Okay, then I'll close public comment. And we'll move along to item 11, which is our consent agenda. And so consent is routine business that is usually handled in one motion unless the council has a question or an item they would like to pull for discussion.
Madam Mayor, can you
Yeah.
pull 11I, please?
11. And I think there was one that I wanted to, I circled it on my other, anybody else have one that they want to pull? Okay. All right, give me 1 second. I thought I had one that I wanted to. Okay, all right, so we will pull 11I, and I will take a motion to approve the rest of the agenda, and then we'll discuss 11I.
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Reedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Eklund,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Pearl,
Yes.
Mayor Andriata.
Yes. Okay. Item 11I, adopt 2 resolutions for the Landscaping and Lighting District Number 1 Annual Update, initiating proceedings and ordering the preparation of the fiscal year 25-26 Engineers Report for Landscaping and Lighting District 1, and 2, approving the preliminary engineers report declaring the intention to order improvements, levy and collect assessments, and settle the public hearing for June 10th, 2025. Did you want a presentation or do you just have a? Okay. Yep, okay.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give a real quick rundown of how this process works. We have lots of different landscaping, lighting districts, benefit assessment districts, all of which operate under this section of law that requires a number of steps in order to levy those direct charges to property owners. And typically the way it works is you pass a resolution of intention each year that you're going to be looking at that. An engineer puts together a report. They essentially accumulate all of the costs for the area benefit, and then they proportionally assess those costs based on how the LLD was set up to the individual property owner. And that report is intended to show what it costs to provide the services in those areas, what additional dollars are collected for reserve, for strategic purposes. Sometimes there's debt that's in those areas that's paying off. That's fairly rare. And then there's like a multi-step process. So this is step 2. Then there's public hearing on June 10th, and we are required to have those adopted prior to June 30th of every year. Because if you miss that deadline, you essentially don't assess for the following year, which would be bad for everyone. So in this particular instance, there are a number of zones that are identified here, and I won't go into every single one, but if the city council's discussed this openly a number of times over the past couple of years. Some of our landscaping and lighting districts were not created correctly. And by that, I mean, in some of them, there is no escalator included. So it's sort of a flat amount that's been assessed since the inception of the district, which is great if you're paying it because it never changes. The problem is that the cost to provide the service, just let's take lighting as an example, does increase on a yearly basis. So what's happened structurally over time with many, many districts in Lincoln, if they're not set up correctly, and you really only have one opportunity to do it at the very beginning, because it's very difficult to change it thereafter. You have to get approval essentially from everybody that lives there, that overrun of cost is essentially being borne by the general fund. To give you a sense of scale, when I first got here, it was, I think the delta was if you combine them all, was the general fund was adding in $600,000 to $700,000 a year. We're well over a million and tracking towards $2 million. And so we have it on our plan to be something that we address and restructure. As we've discussed, it's going to be a very complex and difficult process. So it's almost something we have to clear the deck to address. In the meantime, what we're doing is we're just assessing the reason why we can. One of these specific areas that's referenced is in the Sorrento area. And there's a park there that was expanded a little while ago. And I'm going to kick it over to our Public Works Director to address it because one of the questions that we received prior to meeting was, why is this still being assessed at the max when some areas reduce depending on cost? So, and by that I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but in some areas we may install some drought tolerant landscaping and medians or do some solar projects that may reduce the cost to the LLD, in which case we pass those savings on to the customer. That of course is not the case in all areas. So maybe Matt, you can touch on that.
Sure. Yeah. The Sorrento Aiken Park is relatively new. I don't know when the grand opening was, but I think it was in the last year or two. And those are new expenses. If you've seen that park, there's extensive turf, which is one of the most expensive landscaping assets we could pay to maintain, which is usually weekly mowing and lots of irrigation. But actually, Ed Espinoza sent me a wonderful response that I will read, speaking specifically to this and why the discrepancy with the zones. And he's actually on the call, but I'll save him sharing this himself. But Specifically benefit zone 11, LAD benefit zone 11, 12, 16, 21, 22, 27, 28, and 32 are comprised of commercial properties that are privately maintain the local improvements associated with their parcels. Therefore, these zones are only required to pay their share of the maintenance attributed to citywide facilities, community and regional parks, arterial landscaping, and street lighting. Zone 18, that Sorrento zone, has considerable local improvements associated with the development. Aiken Park landscaping, street lighting, and I know they do take care of some of the landscaping on Friar Ranch Road as well. In addition to paying for ongoing maintenance costs, the city aims to have 6 months of annual maintenance costs on hand for operating reserves for cash flow purposes due to the timing of when the city receives its assessment revenue from the county. Also, the city accumulates reserves to replace the local park landscaping and street lighting improvements once they hit their useful life. And just speaking in generally, we're strained in a lot of these benefit zones, even some of the newer CFD zones. A lot of times the revenue collected does not fully fund the zone. And when we have like a temporary surplus, that's not necessarily a bad thing. With all that turf landscaping, I don't think it would be fiscally responsible to not increase the assessment, knowing that expenses are going to be high to maintain that park. But we do this every year and we can reevaluate. But in terms of setting the cost increases, those are the things that we think about. And like in some of the 12 bridges zones, I know Eric Curlin's probably listening and he's always asking us to rebark. And we don't have enough funding to rebark every year. So we have to, some of the areas have been over 5 years. So a lot of these benefit zones and CFDs, they're strapped. And when there's a temporary reserve, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We don't want every fund zone in the red. So if this conversation is specific to that Sorrento zone, that's why. They're well positioned to continue the park maintenance, and we can reassess again next year and see, with a full year of expenses or 2 years of expenses, how things are trending. And right now, the increase is warranted.
I was asking, a constituent reached out for this very question, so that they addressed
Okay.
it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions from the public on this? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, then I'll take a motion to approve item 11.9.
Move to approve?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Rady,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Pearl,
Yes.
Councilmember Eklund,
Yes.
Mayor Andriata.
Yes. Great, thank you. Okay, item 12, public hearing. 12A, adopt an ordinance to designate fire hazard severity zones within the city of Lincoln in accordance with the recommendations for the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE, pursuant to Government Code Section 51178. Chief Mejia.
On now?
There you go. I already did. You did first.
PowerPoint up and running? Okay. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Anthony Mejia, Deputy Fire Chief. I'll be giving a presentation on the staff report on the fire hazard severity zones adoption. So tonight I'm going to be covering a couple of objectives. First thing I want to do is kind of give an overview again of the CAL FIRE fire hazard severity zone maps. I'm going to go over the new state requirements and why we have to adopt them. I'm also going to review the updated fire hazard severity zone map for the city of Lincoln specifically. And then I want to go over the impact of this for the Lincoln residents. Next, I'm going to tell the Lincoln residents how we've responded to reacting to these maps. And lastly, I'm going to give a staff recommendation about the maps. So why were they created? They were developed mainly to identify areas of wildfire risk. They utilize scientific modeling. They're used for planning, building regulations, insurance assessments, and fire prevention. This helps inform residents on defensible space requirements, also helps us as a city to maybe adopt safer building requirements as well. They were created back in 2007, and it's important to note that they were actually created for the state responsibility area only. And now that has kind of changed. They're updated periodically, which is not really a great thing, but they're based on fire behavior science, fuel loading, climate data, and topography. So what do the maps measure? The maps measure fire hazard, not fire risk. And so I kind of want to make that known to our citizens that if they are in a fire hazard area, that doesn't mean their risk is very high. It means they can do things to mitigate that risk. But these maps focus on landscape conditions, not mitigation efforts, like I just said. They're based on past and future fire behavior, projections, considering fuel slopes and weather patterns. They identify 3 levels of hazard, which are going to be your moderate, your high, and your very high. So what's new? What are the new requirements and why are we having to adopt these or this encroaching on our local responsibility area and here in the city? Is Government Code Section 511178 requires a mandate that we adopt these maps. These maps now require that we adopt them when we have moderate and high zones instead of just the very high severity zones, which were currently in place already. The Government Code Section 51178.5 also requires maps be available for public review and comment for 30 days, which we posted on March 5th, and we've allowed a long review period. Next, the Government Code expands again, and it requires us, 51179 requires that local agencies designate an ordinance, that's what we're doing tonight, for the fire hazard severity zone maps by 120 days of receiving them. We received ours on February 10th, and our deadline is actually June 10th, so we're a little bit ahead of that. During the adoption of it, it does not allow us to reduce the zones. So it doesn't allow us to look at the modeling and say, hey, we don't agree with this. We have to the only option it gives us is to increase the zone severity, which we have not done. And then it requires the local agency to submit a copy of ordinance, the State Board of Forestry and the Fire Protection within 30 days after adoption. So how does this affect the Lincoln residents? Really, this is only going to affect the residents that are living within those zones, the moderate, the high, or the very high. Like I said, currently, we don't have any residents in a very high. We don't have any very high zones in Lincoln. And I wrote in here possible because we are all trying to wrestle with how we're going to handle dealing with these zones and the adoption of these maps. And I say that not only with the city, but as the fire departments in whole throughout the state of California that are affected by this. So with that, we could have possible CAL FIRE defensible space requirements, possible higher homeowners insurance premiums, possibly insurance coverage getting dropped. Also, we could be responsible for real estate inspections for defensible space requirements. Our residents could be with more power safety shutoffs and on high fire danger days. So those are just some of the areas that these things could actually affect our residents. This is our current map. As you can see, we have 2 colors only on the map. The yellow is the moderate area, which we have more moderate. The orange is going to be our high zones. And so again, looking at the map, this kind of is the outskirts of the city, which is probably where most of our zones are at. It doesn't really have anything there in the center. And again, we just don't have any very high severity zones. But again, we're not quite sure how these are going to develop over time. So what has been our response to receiving these maps? First of all, I want the citizens of Lincoln to know that we had no role in determining these zones or creating this map. And what have we done? We've really tried to inform our residents, and we responded by doing the following. We've delivered informational presentations. We've done that online, met with the HOAs. We've posted the map online early, and we allowed for a long comment and review period. Our IT department has created a great interactive map tool for our individual address lookup to see how this affects you individually. We've even matched our grazing efforts to match the severity zones within our area. And then as a fire department, we've increased pre-planning in the areas that have been identified by the modeling, and we're actually using our training to meet those as well. And lastly, we want to be committed to transparency and helping our residents understand the impact of these maps. So staff recommendations. This is a difficult one because after reviewing the maps, I will tell you that we don't fully agree with what the maps are in all of their zones and the fire hazard rating that some of the zones have. And so with that, we know, and I'm dealing with this in a regional approach too, listening to a lot of the different fire departments. We know that the modeling is not current, and that's our biggest problem. So a lot of our areas that we have maybe that are higher zones they're already developed and got subdivisions in there. And when you're looking at it, you're not really seeing that large wildfire threat in those. But after reviewing them again, it is in the best interest of the city to adopt the map modeling shown here with identifying this fire hazard. For one is it's required by the government code 51178, which just doesn't allow us, again, with that government code to downgrade, which if we had that option, that would be something I think that we would explore. And next is that I think that we would be assuming some liability. If we were told that the modeling is showing that we have high severity zones and we have moderate severity zones, and we ended up with a fire there and we chose not to go with the adoption route, I just think it's something that would be a hard thing for us to say that we knew better at this, and we're obviously running on the cautious side of the fence. Lastly is, I think this is going to become an industry standard. I think right now we're dealing with poor modeling. I think we're dealing with a very first system that's kind of setting foot into the LRA. But I think as the modeling gets better, I think actually this would be a good tool. If we start to see, if the fire department itself starts looking at the modeling and going, hey, this is actually accurate, this is showing a good representation of our fire hazard risk, then we can really start to do a good job to match those with our mitigation experts in our training. So right now, I definitely think that this is definitely going to be the industry practice for us, but that's the recommendations from staff, if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. And I think that, I mean, I won't speak for them, I'll let them speak for themselves, but I think that we agree that we don't agree with the maps, but we're not appreciative of the fact that all they did was do Google Earth and they didn't really come out to look at anything. And this is just for the public to know that the FEMA maps that came out, we had a chance to push back on that. They allowed some, conversation about it, to look at what's actually here. With CAL FIRE, they're not letting us do that. And so, to repeat your point, our first thought was, well, we're just not going to pass them because they're not correct. But as you said, if somebody did have a fire, we don't want them to not be able to access the funding to help rebuild or whatever because the council did not. So this is one of those cases where, state law, state regulations, state agencies impose on city governments where we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So, but I appreciate your very thorough and complete explanation of the maps. And so I'll open up to questions or comments from the council, and then we'll open the public hearing.
Yeah, I was going to say that I totally agree with you, that you have to make a decision out of two bad choices, right? But the better of the two bad choices is to protect our residents, same as Mayor Andreotta said. I also would like to really show my appreciation to all the outreach that you guys did. I attended a couple of those sessions, informational sessions. You guys really did a lot of good outreach to our citizens, and so I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, open the
Yeah.
public hearing.
I want to speak really fast.
Okay, would anybody, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Would anybody like to make a testimony on this item? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, close public hearing. Councilmember Ekman.
Yeah, again, thank you for the outreach, and my community had a great presentation by Captain Faddis in our HOA, and I know that you guys have been going above and beyond to help us incorporate any tools or things that we can do to help make our community more fire safe and fire wise. So I know that you are all doing as much as you possibly can and going above and beyond. I feel very uncomfortable with this decision because to what you said, it feels like we're having to make the better of two bad decisions. It's not, we don't agree with it. It's not current. It's not true. Doesn't reflect the severity on the ground with what our experts are seeing. And I don't want to approve this, but I also don't want us to put our community in harm and assume liability. And what that looks like, this is like a really gray area. So I am frustrated. I don't like it, but I also understand that we're an uncharted territory.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize, we're looking at this from the regional approach too. So we're taking this through the Cal Chiefs Association to bring to the state and say, hey, we want this modeling updated more frequently and we want it to be more accurate. And we want to have a say in it. So we're going to try to push that from the chief officer level as well. So hopefully there's some hope at the end of the line.
Yeah, there should be more collaboration.
Yeah, I want to just echo the appreciation for all of the outreach and this similar a reservation about putting our name on something that we don't think is accurate. One textual change that I would propose to the council, if they're open to it, is the resolution as stated says it's recommended. This is a mandate. I think your presentation said so. So there's 3 or 4 places I talked to the city attorney about this. There's 3 or 4 places where we can remove recommended and put in mandated, which is what this really is. And if everyone's in favor of that, I think that would be a nice textual change given the worst
I
of
feel
the
much more
situation.
comfortable with that wording.
Yes, and if you're all on board with that, then I can just do it as a clerical revision.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, well then, I'm ready to accept a motion to approve 12A with the textual changes from recommended to mandated.
Yep, there's like 3 or 4 places.
Yeah.
Also move.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Reedy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Pearl,
Yes.
Councilmember Eklund,
Yes.
Mayor Andriata.
Yes. All right. Item 13, general business. 13A, adopt a resolution approving the recommendation by the Theme and Naming Committee of Level Ranch Road for the future easterly half portion of an arterial road, Oak Tree Lane Extension, within the Village One specific plan area. Michaela, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. I just want to start off by saying congrats to the new members. It's been a while since I've been up here, so I think this is my first time before, after the changing of the guard. So welcome and glad to have you. I have a quick item for you all tonight. We're just asking you all to consider a recommendation from our Theme and Naming Committee, TANK for short, to rename the Oak Tree Lane Extension Road within the Village One specific plan area. So just a bit of context, I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the Village One plan area, but there's Oak Tree Lane is an existing road. However, there was a reconfiguration of the roadway that would essentially loop it back to McBean Park Drive. So that creates 2 ending terminuses at McBean Park Drive and Oak Tree Lane. And during an entitlement review process for the Stardust project, Chief Alves had recommended or requested that we rename the eastern portion of the loop to avoid any potential conflicts with public safety responses. If there's an accident at one intersection and someone's panicking and, hey, I'm at the intersection of McBean Park Drive and Oak Tree Lane, okay, which one? So we don't want any delays there. So there is a natural intersection at kind of the bottom of the loop. There's a north-south collector road that will be put in. So we're requesting essentially the eastern point of that road to rename that. The TANK met back in April to deliberate 2 names. There was Grove Avenue and Level Ranch Road, and it was unanimously voted for the Level Ranch Road name. There's some historical significance there. The Level Ranch family actually owns property in Village One, which is adjacent to this roadway, and they've been ranching within the city for over 100 years. So we're just asking that City Council vote to recommend approval for this based on TANK's recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments or questions?
I really love the history that they are adopting as a part of this. And for me, the history of the community is kind of the core of who we are. That's part of what allows us to be kind of a tight-knit community, right? Hang on to that history, move it on, teach it forward, and, by naming the road with the way that it is, I'm in favor.
Any comment from the public on this? Anybody on Zoom? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Pearl,
Yes.
Councilmember Reedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Eklund,
Yes.
Mayor Andriata.
Yes. Great, awesome. Thanks, Michaela. Appreciate that. Okay, item 13B, adopt resolution approving the recommendation by the Theme and Naming Committee again of the name Ann Ma Reed for the future neighborhood park within the Amar Peary subdivision of the Special Use District Area Northeast Quadrant Specific Plan. Hi, Mel.
Good evening, Councilor. I'm Mel Pavlinas. At the same hearing or meeting that the TANK met back on April 9th, the TANK considered the name Anna Mar Reed for the proposed, the ongoing construction of a park. A park will be built at the Sudbee site. The Mar or Pier property is under construction currently, phase one of that subdivision. And within that subdivision is the 4-acre park. And the tank considered the name Anna Mar Reed, who had correspondences with back in the 1940s during the war with the men at war. And then it was also published some articles in the local newspaper. So one of the tank considered that name. Elizabeth Jansen recommended the name, and as well as Jerry Johnson. And there were other names that was identified, but this is the name that the tank considered, and given her legacy. And so it's being recommended to your council for approval tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions on this one?
I was on the tank for a year. It's interesting to go through and look at the history as you research these things. Does anyone know, how did she get the moniker Ma?
No idea. I wish Elizabeth Jensen was here, but she's not here in the audience. But there's a lot of articles that was provided to me, but I don't remember how she arrived with the name Ma.
I'm guessing everybody called her Ma.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Any comments from the public? Anybody on Zoom? Yeah, Zoom is quiet tonight. Okay, all right. Well, I love it. I think it's great. I agree with what Ben said earlier, that it's really important to remember our history and people who made this place what it is, even if it was decades ago that people now don't know, but it's good to remember. So I like that we name our parks and our different geographic figures or features after our historical figures. So I'm ready to take a motion to approve item 13B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Pearl,
Yes.
Councilmember Reedy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Eklund,
Yes.
Mayor Andriotta.
Yes, thanks, Mel. Appreciate it. All right, item 13C, Titan Missile Site Update Discussion. Mr. Scully.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good evening. So one of the things we discussed when this item was coming to City Council quite often, we were doing pretty regular updates, and that was when some of my partners in the audience, who are kind of part of our ad hoc committee, we were working on trying to draw attention to this remediation that had, at least in our local opinion, kind of languished for a number of years. We were updating pretty regularly about how things were going and who we were advocating, and getting the Corps out for presentations. And then a lot of that work kind of culminated in the Corps, Army Corps of Engineers finally creating a remediation advisory board and taking some more affirmative steps in moving towards eventual cleanup of the TCE contamination, which has now moved mostly off-site of the former missile silos. I will say that, depending on who you speak to, sometimes we can get a little bit frustrated that that process has not moved much more quickly than we would have liked. But the progress that's been made from when this whole thing started to today, you look back, it's been significant. There's been a lot more attention drawn to it. There's been lots of articles written on it, a lot of media attention, congressional attention. We've had brass from the military out to look specifically at the site. So there's been a lot of positivity. But it's a slog. It takes a really long time to see these things through to the end. And so the grand jury published a report about a year ago. And aside from a number of recommendations that mostly we agreed with in terms of pushing information out when we get it from the remediation advisory board, we also talked a lot, at least at a council level, about coming back every so often and just giving a little update as to how things are going. What are the latest? And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. And then I know there's some people in the audience that have some additional info they'd probably like to share. So if you go back to last year, we had a visitor from Major Green, who at that time was the commanding officer that was overseeing this district of the Corps responsibility. And she attended a large event at Sun City to give the community an update. And we actually, a few of us were very blessed to be able to have a private meeting with her where we kind of discussed how this works and what level of interest there is in the project back in Washington, D.C. And Since then, there was really two kind of key things that have occurred in my mind. The first is there's a lot of concern, and there still is some, that the contamination was, whether or not the contamination had spread past the boundaries of the uninhabited area of the Crocker Knoll parcel, which is to the south west of Titan site, and into the inhabited area of the borders of Sun City. And it's concerning, if you're new to this issue, the concern is that TCE is a contaminant that is associated with, it's a carcinogen, and so it's associated with cancer. It's particularly dangerous when you're in an enclosed space. So it's a soil, it's in water as well, but we're concerned primarily with the soil vapors. And these soil vapors, if you live under a plume, the concern is that without remediation or other technology that mitigates it, it can come up through the foundation and slab of your structure, and you're caught in an enclosed space with it, and you're breathing it without even knowing it. And it's particularly dangerous for pregnant women. But not a contaminant you want to live with, regardless of whether or not you're pregnant or not. So there was a lot of concern in the community, and council heard that a number of times at public hearings here about property values and personal health. So the Corps, after a lot of lobbying, eventually did place a few monitoring wells along the borders to confirm or not confirm that the contamination had spilled through. And what the findings have generally said thus far is that they're generally non-detect in those areas. So for now, that's good. Now, does it mean that it doesn't exist in other areas? No, but as far as they have been able to tell us, it doesn't appear so at this moment. So that's good, because it means that we can refocus more on getting to the cleanup stage. The next step, objective that has not been achieved yet is, we were told at one time during the spring of last year that sometimes toward the end of 24, and this is my memory, so it could be a little shaky, is that they were going to release a document that's essentially a plan for the remediation. It says how they're going to do it, roughly what it's going to cost, and a timeline of when it's going to get done. That was not issued last year. It has not been issued this year, and based on the timeline that exists on the Corps' website currently, it looks like they're shooting for 26. So our job is going to continue to advocate that actually gets completed. They have a very rigid and specific process to how they actually get to the cleanup portion. They have a long period of study. They then have a long period of engineering where they determine what is the most appropriate and cost-effective mechanism to clean it, because there's a lot of different ways to do that. And then once that is complete, then there's an appropriations process that they go through at a federal level, where the Department of Defense essentially has to make decisions about, with this limited pool of resources they have to remediate thousands of sites that are contaminated with all kinds of things, where they employ those dollars. So one of the things you'll hear if you ever attend a meeting up there in Sun City or a RAB meeting is the consistent question is, well, when? And they haven't been able, they cannot answer that question, because frankly, they don't know the answer to that question. There are a lot of variables. So we've, when our group was meeting a lot, one of the things we agreed on was, let's just focus on what we can control. So really out lobbying to get that plan done. Once that milestone is complete, then you move to the next stage of lobbying to get the money to get it cleaned up. And so that is essentially where it's at now. What's happened since the group that we were involved with is not meeting quite as much for a couple different reasons, but the Remediation Advisory Board has sort of taken the at least public process, and they're a function and a creature that's created by the Corps, so they hold those meetings. We attend, but that's really their responsibility. The latest are that they held a meeting last month with updates. They typically will take a bunch of questions, and then they will go either answer those in meeting, or they will provide written responses in newsletter forms. The RAB is putting a newsletter out on a monthly basis, I believe. The other important detail is if you've been following us for a long time, there's a number of issues with the site, but two key ones are the TCE contamination. The second one is lead contamination. So for those that are new, at one time, this area, after it had been conveyed to Placer County, was created as a outdoor shooting range for sheriff's deputies. And so Ann, who's in the office, can tell you that if you walk in certain areas lots of areas of the site and just reach down and pick up some dirt, very likely you'll see little buckshot pellets in your hand. So it's out there. Another success that the city council had was we were able to work with Placer County, and they eventually agreed to remediate the site to the highest level, called a commercial standard, I believe. And what that entails is digging down a number of inches and carting out all of that dirt and lead to an EPA-approved landfill, which usually exists in Arizona and New Mexico, I believe, Nevada maybe. And they have assigned a contractor for that work and have budgeted money for it. So really good news there. So that's something that's a little bit more within our direct control. That is generally what we know as it exists today. The information that I will say, people have different opinions on this. The core staff that at least I've worked with directly, while they can't provide every answer we want to hear, they do try to be responsive to us, just understanding that they are also managing many, many other projects, all of whom have people that are really interested in seeing it cleaned up. And so generally appreciate their ability, even when they've had to come to some meetings where people are really mad, including me sometimes. So that's the general update. We can provide more detail for you if you'd like. You have some information that Ann Burge has created. She is our resident historian of the Titan site and knows way more about it than I ever could hope to or want to. And she's also here tonight. I'm sure she's going to provide comment, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had any on the update.
Do you have any questions or comments before we go to the public, or?
The only comment I would have is I really appreciate Ann and the RAB for the work that they've done and all the community citizens that are involved in that. Because really it takes a community with the backing of us to get something done. And so without that combination, it's just, so I can't say thank you enough to you for all that you have done.
Yeah, this is a very complex operation that we're dealing with. We're dealing with all three levels of government, with the Corps of Engineers, the Water Resources Board from the state, and the county. At the last RAB meeting, the county representative said that they should be finished with their component of it by the end of this year, maybe the very first month or two in the new year. So that's very good. It'll be good to have a win, at that point, and then we just keep on applying the pressure, applying the pressure, applying the pressure, and just move forward.
I have a couple questions really quickly. Go ahead. I'm sorry in advance because I realize how hard it is to probably give even a rough estimate. But okay, so we're waiting for the plan. Do we have any idea, once we get the plan, what the timeline is to get approved for funding? And then do we have any idea how long it is after funding to get to the cleanup? Is that like a 5 to 10 year, 15 year? Do we know at all?
No. So we've asked that question, and the typical answer, and my friends in the audience can help confirm or not confirm this. The typical answer they give is, we can give you a timeline of the next step, which is roughly when we think we can release the plan. And I'm going to say this again. I appreciate the core reps that I work with, so I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. But as I've told you earlier, that plan has moved a couple times. So what I can tell you, having worked on other cleanup projects that involve the federal government, is it really depends on the priority that the federal government places on this site in particular. So the reality of it is if this was a very high priority, you could see things happening right after the plan is approved. I think more realistically, just given what we know about other sites that have contamination levels 100 times worse than what we're experiencing here, is we probably don't reach that level of priority. So I could tell you that I think it would be relatively reasonable to say that you see cleanup activities occur within the next 5 years, but you could easily come back in 5 years and say that's completely nonsense, and you would be right.
We're
So,
still waiting for the plan.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, last question. With the Placer County doing their, their mitigation cleanup, do we know at all if that affects our timeline or if it makes us less severe?
You mean in terms of the lead portion? Well, look, everything's comparable. So by comparison, Placer County's process has been lightning fast. That said, I think that we got to some sort of general agreement with them on this matter over 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. And interestingly, it came about as a result of the city at one time, we were in negotiations to purchase that property for them from a regional park. And one of the concerns that the council at that time had was, we're not really interested in taking on a property that has any contamination, let alone lead contamination. And so, I suppose if it's cleaned up, we can talk again. That said, there was a responsibility that the county has with the water board to clean it up. So it's not like they had a choice, but they did do, from my perspective, they did what was right. They cleaned it up with the most expensive treatment option that they could afford. Yeah.
And you've been waiting patiently. Your turn.
Members of the council and Richard Pearl for meeting me at the site with Paul Breckenridge from the county and listening to me ramble. And of course, Sean. I've been with this for over 2 years now when I saw the lead issue on the silo doors out there. Right now, I believe that the site at 62 years of age is getting ready for Medicare. And by the time this thing is fixed, it'll be ready for assisted living. So I have given you all a handout that you can look at later. It's got a letter that I sent to all the elected officials and everybody explaining that it's not just the TCE on the residential area. I'm still concerned about that, but it's being handled. It's the actual 46-acre site. It is dangerous. And 2 months, back in February, and then again a couple of months ago, Matt Marlatt with the Corps said that the county is the one responsible for the cleanup of the underground, the millions of gallons of lead, DDT, asbestos, and PCB contaminated water that is leaking out of that facility. Plus, the facility structures themselves were damaged during construction and while all this water has been going through. So you have a dangerous structure there that the Corps has said, that's the county's issue. Well, it's also a city issue because it's citizens that are living here. But the county is wrong. The Corps was absolutely wrong saying that the county must be the ones that clean it up if they want to. Back in the late 60s, the Secretary of Defense was told in no uncertain terms, you will clean up private property, including things like the county property. You will clean up all of the contamination and demolish structures and remove the debris. You'll see that in the letter that I wrote. So that's what this is all about. There's pictures in here of what a structure like the powerhouse. The powerhouse is 127 feet across and about 50 feet deep with no internal support system, and it's only 10 feet from the surface. When they come in to remove the lead, I even mentioned to the Corps when the county comes in to remove the lead ammunition, they're going to have an issue with the big sieve machines on top of these structures. There was a report written in the late 60s by or for the Corps that said these buildings were not poorly built, but they weren't satisfactorily built, and they described why the compaction issues, the foundation issues were bad if there had been a launch. Well, those structures are bad, and I've written everything in here to prove that they are bad, given documentation, and the Corps has gotten it, and they've ignored me for 2 years on all of these issues. So I'm hoping the city will say, hey, let's stand up and ask the Corps, please, look at this. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Ann. We really appreciate that.
Pardon?
I said we really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comment on this item? Go ahead.
Adjacent, I look out on this field every day. And one of the questions that keeps coming up is how long does the owner of that property have to wait to develop that property? Hidden Hills went ahead, Oak Tree went ahead, and they're building paved roads right over one of the worst areas that has TCE under it right now. And everybody is saying, oh, well, they had their chance. Well, if their chance, realistically, what I hear is best case, they might start in 3 years. Maybe, but they won't give you a date. So right now, there's this piece of property that a very fine gentleman owns that is now mowing the weeds down because the Army Corps wouldn't do it. They have 40-some wells there of one type, 20 of another type. They're driving cars out on it into the high weeds, and it could start a fire and burn down Snapdragon and Prunella Court. I've called them, I've told them, I asked them. The owner of the property asked them, what are you going to do to get access to these wells? They ignored him. So he stood up and said, okay, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to pay to knock down the weeds on this 25, 26 acres. So I've told him, great, thanks. I think I've copied some of you on that. And so I just don't know, how long does a man have to wait? Can he just get a permit in 3 weeks and say, heck with you, I'm going to go ahead and build the 100 homes over all this, like Hidden Hills is doing, that now has to put plastic liners under the homes, that now has to put venting in the bathroom on the park? So they're absorbing all this cost because the Army Corps is behind. Everybody that you talk to off the record says, we have tons of information. We don't need any more. We could start tomorrow. It's just not a priority for us. You're not in our top 10 list, and we're probably not. But again, how long does a owner of 25, 26 acres has to wait, or she just say, heck with it, I'm going to build over it, let the Army Corps tunnel underneath my buildings? So I just don't know how we can continue to do that as a city and not tell the United States Army Corps, we need a meeting here now with not the project manager. They don't know anything. Not even the major. She kind of knows. There's people above them that are deciding when, where, and how. And I don't know how we get to, I've tried, they don't return my calls. So we need the city's help to push them forward somehow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yes, go ahead, Ann.
There's a section of Crocker Knoll adjacent to Oak Tree Lane, and it's in your packet, that I found had a permanent restrictive easement placed on it by the General Services Administration the same day the county bought that property, bought the 46 acres across the street. That permanent restrictive easement has been removed, and I'm not sure why. That Crocker Knoll is probably where they had the batch plant that processed at least 30,000 cubic yards of concrete there. It also had a fueling station there because they couldn't put the fueling station on the actual site because of vapors being sucked in by the fresh air vents. And you'll see a fresh air vent in there in your packet. But this permanent restrictive easement has been removed, and it was put there for a reason, and I'm not sure why it was removed. And I hope that you all will ask the Corps to give you answers as to why that it was 9 acres. You've got it in there in your packet explaining who got what when they gave the property back. So if you can look into it, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to answer Stan's question, I've talked with the property owner about that a number of times. And my read, at least, is that there is nothing, at least here on a local level, or that I can find on title that would restrict him from submitting for development of the property. I know that because there are plenty of sites in California that have active TCE plumes that are in remediation or not, that have built on areas that are far more contaminated than this site is. And in fact, we had Lenny Siegel is a gentleman who works out of the Bay Area, and he advocates for cleanup of contaminated former federal sites. Knows a lot about all of this. He's a former mayor. Do you remember Ann Palo Alto? Forget the city, a Bay Area city of some kind. And he remarked to us that there are areas of that community adjacent to former military installation that have concentrations that are much, much higher, and they have residences that live over the top of them. It's a function of how you develop the site and create infrastructure to make sure that the people are safe while living there. Whether or not from a business perspective, it makes sense to do that is a different question. So if that's the question, I would have to defer to the people that know a little bit more about the cost of that, but it certainly is possible. In fact, I've talked with the property owner about, if you're interested in starting the entitlement process, we're not going to throw away your application if it comes in. So that's our perspective as it stands today.
Tony Frazier, Frazier Design Group. I wasn't planning to talk, but I just want to correct one thing. I know mentioned the gentleman about Hidden Hills and TCE. Hidden Hills does not have TCE under it. What they're doing is additional precaution measure for a few houses that are near the area, but there's no TCE under Hidden Hills. That's been clear. There's nothing there. It's beyond Hidden Hills. There's a little area that's open space park, and beyond it, that's the area that has a TCE in it. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? Betty on Zoom? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll go ahead and unmute Fran Neves.
Hi, I'm glad you let Anne speak more than her 3 minutes. I thought she was part of the presentation. So I have a question. If the county has actually started any cleanup over there, I go down that road 6 times a week and I see all these trucks and everything. And I just wonder, what's really happening and who would want to buy a house with all that stuff underneath it, It's just, don't they have to disclose to people that there's all that stuff? I just don't understand why all that development is going on before it's cleaned up. You'd think then if, like Sean's saying, that we don't know where we're going to be on the list when they finally do decide to clean it up and say, well, you've got people living there, maybe we should clean it up, So, and I wonder, I'm really happy you're going to name Level Ranch Road that after the Levels. They have been here for 4 generations at least. And I wonder when our signal light is going to go in at Oak Tree Lane. I wonder if there is any more time, it's really dangerous, very dangerous. Sometimes workers are out there helping us drive in and out of our parking lot, but it's really dangerous. So you can see on the other side of 193 where the places are ready for the signal light. But on our side, it looks like maybe they're going to get ready to pave the road, actually. It does look like there's something going in. But are they going to have to finish the road all the way out back to 193 before we get that signal light? I just thank you for taking my comments.
Thanks, Fran. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
Okay. So a couple things. One is I am not a medical professional or an expert in contamination, but what I've heard from those that are is that they are not concerned. You could walk through the Crocker Knoll parcel every single day on a nice leisurely stroll and not feel concerned that you're going to necessarily become sick as a result of it. They're concerned about confined air spaces. So as Tony mentioned, currently we don't have living quarters that are planned to be built over the plume. As I mentioned in the past comment, that doesn't mean that you couldn't do it. There's equipment that you can install under the slab of your home that will essentially, it's sort of a fan setup. Essentially, it's a pipe that goes under the slab of your home. It pulls in, essentially ventilates from below the subsurface of your home, thereby making sure that those contaminants are not evaporating up into your home. That's not what's been proposed. We've actually talked with property owners there on a variety of other non-residential uses, storage and other things that would be lower impact and less risk. Whatever they propose, you have to imagine that what happens is we review it, our engineering team reviews it, our planning team reviews it, and then we circulate it out to all those agencies that have already been named, the Corps, the Water Board, all of the public health agencies, and they are usually pretty conservative about what they require in order for something to move forward. So that's that. Not really related to this item, but I'll just answer it really quickly.
How's the county started? How's the county started?
Yeah, thanks, Fran. Yes, the county has not started the work out there. We will let you know when they do give a notice to proceed, and I'm sure that you will see more trucks that going down Oak Tree Lane. And then the last question about Oak Tree Lane is that I cannot give you an exact date when it's going to be complete. It is completely dependent at the moment on when PG&E gets out and energizes the intersection. You want to, Vin, add to that quickly?
Yeah, I do have a little bit of update on the construction work over at the intersection of McBean Park Drive and Oak Tree Lane. PG&E, believe it or not, actually showed up the Friday before last Friday. So now Tykert has a couple more weeks of work, and then we'll need PG&E again as far as Taylor Morrison and improvements that are needed along the north side of McBean Park Drive. I've been working with the developer's engineer. Now it looks like southern leg of Oak Tree Lane's actually moved ahead of the improvements along McBean Park Drive. So we're trying to get the two projects synchronized so that, you know, they both end up, you know, paving operations can both occur at the right time, you know, in order to, so what many of the public do not see is the major infrastructure that's needed before the paving can occur. That, for the most part, has occurred to the south along Oak Tree Lane. Now there's a lot of work to be done by Taylor Morrison along McBean Park Drive. And you will see that when the lane shifts. Right now, the southern half of the road is being used. But when that shift happens, then you'll see, you know, once the northern half is paved, then traffic will be shifted to the north side, and then they'll work on the other side. So, you know, it looks like there's progress. Realistically, I'm thinking, you know, it's probably going to be till the end of the year when the signal's functioning.
And council, this item has not been agendized and we're off topic.
Yeah, we are off topic. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Any other public comment on this item? No? Okay, I'll close public comment. And if there's no other comments or questions about the Titan missile update, then it's just an update, nothing to, okay.
Discussion.
Yeah, just discussion. Great. Go ahead.
There's a meeting, one moment, in June. I don't have, of course, it fell off my computer screen. There's a meeting in June. I'll get the exact date. I think it's the 14th. It's at McBean Pavilion is the next RAB meeting. It's not at Sun City. We gave the Corps and RAB that building to use to hold those since it's, well, we gave it to them at no cost so that they could hold those meetings and pack as many people in there as we can get in there. So, and also I think it's kind of nice to, the area, the contamination doesn't just affect Sun City. It's kind of been treated that way, but it really doesn't. There's, you know, a lot of other areas of Village One. And so we wanted to have an opportunity for people that maybe don't live up there and plugged in to also attend.
Okay, moving on, item 13D, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a lease agreement with The Towers LLC for a telecommunications facility at 12 Bridges Park.
Yes, thank you very much. So we're excited about this item. We don't get excited about cell towers all that often because we get lots of cell towers here in Lincoln, and it's not like it's new technology. But nonetheless, if you live in 12 Bridges or in Catavadera or in portions of Sun City, you know that depending on your carrier, cell service is spotty. And in some cases, Councilmember Eklund and I joke a lot because we speak on the phone a lot. And so when she's driving to her home, I will not hear her for 45 seconds and pretend that I did hear everything she said for the last 45 seconds. So it's just been kind of a pain. And these are mature neighborhoods that have had to kind of live with this for a really long time. And we don't provide cell service as a municipal service. And so we don't really have much control over when and where they choose to expand their service. So the first few complaints I got about this when I first started, I said, well, you know, I hate to hear that. Hopefully they'll expand at some point. And then after about the 15th complaint, I started calling around to carriers and companies that do these towers for cell phone providers and asked, you know, hey, is there any possibility? Is there any interest? And then just one day, Epic Wireless contacted me and who works with Verizon and said, hey, we really like a site out there by 12 Bridges, and would you be interested? And I sort of jumped off my seat, and then we got to sort of negotiate it. So over the next number of months, took us quite some time. Site was located. One of the things that was slightly inaccurate, it's my fault, is the site is identified in the plan paperwork as Coyote Pond. The park that's by 12 Bridges Park and Coyote Pond are very close to one another as a crow flies. And so they're sort of connected by open space. So it's not wrong, but the technically correct location is 12 Bridges Park. It's behind, if you've ever been to the Rib Cook-Off, the cell phone tower essentially would go behind where the green field stops. There's a large hill to the back with kind of a grouping of trees up there. And that's the site that has the highest elevation in the area that's been identified. So what we are proposing is a lease to this company, as we do with all of our cell towers, for 3,600 square feet and necessary easements for utilities and some landscape buffering. This will serve as the basis for the antenna equipment and the ground infrastructure. Unlike many other places, this doesn't require any removal of our infrastructure. You may recall you just approved one at McBean Park a year ago, very different scenario. And what you're going to have to kind of put on your two hats tonight. Take off one, which is your land use hat, throw that away for now. This is your business hat tonight. The land use component of this is separate and not connected to your approval this evening. The developer, who I believe is here this evening, is well aware that even if this is approved and effectuated, it doesn't become relevant or live until and unless they go through the planning process and obtain planning commission approval. And as a couple of our council members know, that's an involved process with a lot of community feedback. I will say, though, from that perspective, that compared to other sites that have been proposed before, this is better. It's pretty far from any dwelling unit. There are some things that we think can be done to mask the tower. So we think that's actually a reasonable location. Here are the business terms. It is a 40-year lease. The way they're typically structured is they're 5-year increments that automatically renew unless something changes. The initial rent per month to the city is $2,000 monthly with an annual escalator of 2.5%. There's also a revenue sharing provision that if additional carriers for other companies, i.e. not Verizon, choose to negotiate deals with the developer to add antennas onto those, which I think almost all of our cell towers have a number of carriers on them, an additional $200 per month for each additional broadband carrier is added. There's an option fee of $2,000 for a 2-year option period, which ostensibly gives them the time to go through all of their paperwork. And as I said, total leased area is 3,600 square feet. That comes out to if they never add any carriers to the tower, it comes to a rough total of $1.449 million over that term. And which, over 40 years is not a ton of money. But when you figure that you probably will have additional carriers that come onto it, which also improves your escalation factor, I modeled that it could be as high as $2.5 million over that term. But as I wrote in the report, the financial part of it is only one part. We likely fold that money into things that we need. I think almost all of those revenues drop into the general fund. But the real reason for it is to try to facilitate a service that the community over there really needs. Everybody lives on their cell phones these days, and so not having service even in some areas is a problem for people. So we're kind of are enthusiastically recommending approval of this. But by the way, if you're curious, hey, is this reasonable compared to what other places get? Melissa, who I think is here this evening from a developer, was schooling me up that she gets that question all the time, and it's really apples and oranges. So what a deal looks like in San Francisco is going to look a lot different than it does in Lincoln, and a lot different than it does in, San Diego. There's a component to land value. There's a component to how many people it's serving, markets in those areas. But I can tell you, we've checked with some of our local jurisdictions that have done deals recently, and it's equivalent or in some cases a little bit better than some of those. So we think it's fair and it provides the service people need. So happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Sean. This revenue that will be coming in from this tower, what fund does that go into?
I've touched, Nita's out 6 tonight, but I'm 99.9% sure it drops into the general fund.
Okay. Good. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Any questions from the public? Anybody online?
Yes, thank you. Fran Neves.
Well, I'd just like to say, Sean, you sure do a good job. You really do a great job. And I'd also like to thank Vin for explaining things so well. And when I was on before, I didn't get to thank him. I got cut off. I still had a minute left, but you guys tend to cut us off when we're on Zoom and we don't get to respond and just say thank you. And I also wanted to thank Vin for the last time I was on and asked him about the cardboard box recycling when he explained, that they can't open it until the developer finishes their job. And I agree, you can't pay them until they finish their job. And I'd like to suggest that we have a ribbon cutting actually when they do finish that over at the library. So I live over there. I've been up on that hill and I like that. And I hope you do make the cell tower look more like the trees, because the drawing in the map that I read on the agenda looked kind of strange. And I also like the map that you had for the Oak Tree Lane going into Level Ranch. It really helps to look at those maps. So just thank you again, everybody, for doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. And so just to clarify, it was not an intent to cut you off. I believe you said you were finished, so I apologize if we cut you off at the last time, but thank you for your comments. We really appreciate that. Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you for doing this in our community. We really needed this service. As our city manager said, it's also a safety concern. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people, hundreds of people that are going to be jumping for joy when they can stay on their phone all the way home up the hill without getting cut off or have to pull over to finish their conversations or just not be heard. So thank you. I had a quick question. When I know that there's been a lot of interest and buzz about this particular tower and that it's going to be Verizon, which is awesome. Is there any particular community input that is recommended, or does it make a difference for community members to advocate for their cell phone to be one of the co-locations, or is that just done privately with the business?
Yeah, so maybe if Melissa's here, she might come up and address that. That's outside of my area of expertise.
So good evening, everybody. Melissa Ofina with Epic Wireless on behalf of Verizon and Vertical Bridge, the Towers LLC. So the tower right now, as we're proposing it, actually has space for 2 additional co-location carriers in addition to Verizon, so 3 total. And the way that process goes, it just depends on who has that need out there. So it might be AT&T, it could be T-Mobile. It's just whenever they come out. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it would prevent more than 3 total. There are different options to extend the tower if necessary, if there's a 4th or 5th carrier that need to be on there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, thank you so much.
Appreciate that. Okay, if you have no more questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve item 13D.
I motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Eklund.
Yes.
Councilmember Reedy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Pearl.
Yes.
Mayor Andriata.
Yes, thank you. Okay, item 13E, adopt a resolution approving a school facilities agreement with the City of Lincoln, Western Placer Unified School District, and Lewis Land Holding LLC for a TK-8 school within Village 7, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement subject to city attorney concurrence.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, I'm going to give a very brief history of this because although council has been very, very involved in this for a while now, being briefed on it for a couple of years, it may be new to some residents. And so I'm going to just talk through what it is, why we're doing it, why I think it's important and exciting. And then I'm going to switch gears, and there is a, what do we call this, Hope? A purple sheet here available for review, which is a supplemental agenda materials that were completed prior or after we had posted the agenda. This doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen, especially in complex agreements like this. And they include an updated agreement that include edits from Lewis Planned Communities and Western Placer Unified School District, which there's not a lot of edits, but I will step you through each one of them, kick it to City Council, get some concurrence on that, and then we'll see what your pleasure is in terms of approval. So Village 7 was annexed into the city now 13 years ago. And during that time, a lot of things have happened. Markets have changed. They were low and now have rebounded and then flattened and rebounded. And Lewis, all along, this was one of their largest project they have in Lincoln. We're completing Independence. And as that project reached its natural conclusion, it shifted and Village 7 became the priority. And about a year and a half ago, backbone infrastructure work started in earnest. And so Lewis poured and will continue to pour millions of dollars into infrastructure to get that area ready for development. It included one bridge, and there will be more bridges that were poured along Ferrari Ranch, water lines, sewer lines, everything you need to make a community work. And as all of that's occurring in the background, there's this discussion that's also happening, which is partially a big desire of Lewis Planned Communities in Western Placer and also City of Lincoln, but it's also something we were hearing about from the community a lot during that time period. Concern about whether or not we were going to have a similar problem that some other subdivisions in Lincoln that have experienced in terms of building this community and then having a school site lag behind, in some cases over a decade or two, before it's actually able to serve that community it was built for. And we won't go into all the reasons why it's so complex and difficult for school districts to build schools, but suffice to say, it's incredibly expensive. We don't work under a state architecture that creates a funding mechanism that makes it easy and fast for school districts to get that done. And what school districts are required to build under state law is far more expensive than anything you or I would ever build, or for example, the city would build due to increased building standards. So all of those reasons has put Western Placer in a difficult position of how do we deliver a very needed facility for 3,000 new residential units starting so far from behind. So about 2 years almost ago, we had a meeting with developer, myself, and Carrie Callahan, the superintendent, and we're talking through we threw everything against the wall. What could we do to try to figure out a solution to facilitate this? This also comes from a commitment that city councils in the past and currents have made to try to collaborate more with the school district. I think it's fair to say that both agencies kind of get tunnel vision on what we provide because it's really hard to do, and we don't really worry too much about everybody else's responsibilities. And what we talked about at the workshop the council held on this a couple weeks ago is that it's really you have to take a long view when you're building a community. And by that, I mean, none of this works if one piece is substandard. So it doesn't work if our water system isn't up to par. It doesn't work if our police infrastructure can't serve it, or fire. It doesn't work if the school system isn't robust and isn't providing the great service they do there. Anything that's left out leads to a substandard community, and Lincoln has long kind of had a higher standard than that. So although it's difficult, we started to work on a concept, and the concept in very simple terms is this. The city has a mechanism that we use called a community facilities district, where we assess costs to development to ensure that development doesn't impact other folks that have lived here before that. So how do you make sure that when you build a new home, it doesn't cost the person next door money? And one way to do that is to assess fees to those areas for the direct benefit that they're receiving. The way we typically do it outside of the school being involved is we assess for parks, we talked about it earlier, and lighting, and if the subdivision wants really robust landscaping, okay, they pay for that. And we even have mechanisms now in place where we have a small assessment that's assessed on new development for public safety and for citywide parks that are not necessarily in the area. So that's all been kind of thought through. What we hadn't thought through before, and I could be wrong, I'm just not aware of this model elsewhere, is what if we found a way to fold in the school into that funding mechanism? So and how do you do that? So it started off with a discussion of a K-6 school that would have a park that was integrated into the school. So it served dual uses. It was a place for the kiddos to play at recess, and then every other time is for the community to use. And that's not a new model. All over the place they have it. And we particularly like it because it drives me a little crazy when I'm driving through a subdivision and there's a park right next door to a school, neither of which use them. Either party doesn't use the other one. So the taxpayer is essentially paying for dual uses that doesn't necessarily give them benefit from a dual perspective. So that was the original concept. Over time, the school district, I think, has long wanted to go to a TK, transition K, kindergarten through 8th grade concept versus a K-6. A lot of reasons for that. I'm not an education professional, so Carrie could explain why it's important. But from a more practical perspective, instead of building a middle school and an elementary school, you're simply building a larger elementary school with middle school amenities to have all of those services at one location. And at least from a staff perspective, we like that concept. We think it's an efficient use of land. And we thought, wow, that's a different kind of value we could present given the contribution that it's going to take to make it happen. So then once that was booked, the real work began. And I will be honest, I talked about this at the workshop, it's been a very difficult process, a very difficult negotiation. It's been frustrating. Whenever you have 3 different parties that have 3 different aims, it's really hard to band-aid all of those together in a way where all parties sort of feel like they're getting something fair out of the deal, even, and protect. All parties want to be protected at the same time, which makes it even more complex. So the document that you have in front of you tonight has been through, I don't know, 20 iterations, back and forth, committee meetings, subcommittee meetings, individual meetings with city council members, pro formas, spreadsheets, consultation with bond professionals, lawyers, you name it. Everybody's had a look at it. And it's really tested our ability to collaborate in a way that I wasn't prepared for, because it takes a long time to really sort it out. There are 3 main funding components here. The first is that 11%-ish of the CFD bond proceeds are sort of staked aside for the school. What happens is the developer, many developers, once they build a subdivision is they assess some fees in a CFD format to reimburse themselves for the massive amount of upfront costs that they would place otherwise within the purchase price of a home, to, make themselves whole for the roads and the you name it, right? Parks, roads, water lines, et cetera. So, excuse me, we add the schools to that mix, the school to that mix, with a joint use park concept. We've talked with the school district about the design of this park, which is not complete, it hasn't started yet, but what will be critical is that we're going to try to thread a very difficult needle. The park needs to feel as much like a city park that's inviting to the community as it does a usable school site. That will be, the devil will be in those details when we get to them. But conceptually, the idea is that any time that the school is not in session, when the kiddos need to be in a secured environment, it's open for anybody's use. The other interesting thing about the park that we would not have had if this was just a city park is that you would have seen normal amenities you normally see at a park. A tot lot, some shade, a couple sports fields, the standard things we require in parks. Schools have more needs than that. So they need hard courts, and they need track fields, and they need more sports amenities, which at first we were a little hesitant about. And as we thought about it more, we think actually it provides some interesting recreational opportunities that don't exist in parks that we have currently here in Lincoln. For example, we don't have a track that's available for anybody to use. Have been a runner myself for a long time. It'd be nice to go down to a space like that. There's also a multi-purpose room component, which I'll touch on a little bit later, which we're seeking joint use on as well. So you have the CFD funding component, and then the other two funding streams are as follows, although those will live in a joint use document that's sort of separate of this, although they're referenced here, and we'll talk about that. The first is that we collect fees for the citywide CFD to maintain parks, as Matt discussed earlier. What we're proposing here is a shift in that revenue. Instead of us taking those dollars and spending them on maintenance, the school district assumes maintenance responsibilities of the park, and we shift those dollars to the school. The school will then use those dollars to capitalize on additional revenues to build the school. If they were going to take them simply to maintain the park, it would be a different discussion, but it's a key revenue stream for them. The second is there's an impact fee we charge on new development that's called non-critical facilities, and that's essentially for, community centers and things of that nature, buildings for recreation. And what's built in there is the K-8 school will typically have a much larger multi-purpose gym. And part of the idea is that it's about $500 per door, comes out to about $1.5 million total throughout the entirety of the project. That goes into the funding bucket. And in exchange, a joint use agreement is negotiated with the city and school to have rights to program that multi-purpose place, X number of days per week. Similar to if we built one ourselves and we're using it during certain times of the day for, basketball or volleyball or whatever recreation program we think is reasonable there. So those are the three funding streams. It's much more complex than that. It's in the document, but in kind of Cliff Notes version, that's essentially what it is. Okay, so any questions on the history before I move on to the details? Good? Okay. Okay, here are the details. So key changes in your agreement. Council held this workshop a couple weeks ago to go through the draft agreement. And generally the feedback was, okay, interesting idea. We like it. There's some detail things that are really important to us as a city council that we want to see amended and changed in the agreement to provide some taxpayer protection, to make sure that some excess dollars that may exist at the end of the bonding period are going towards things that the council thinks are important, and some other protections that we just discussed in general in terms of the language. So we make those edits. We send those over to the school district. Their attorneys and Lewis's attorneys review. They provide some feedback to us. That document is on your purple sheet there, and I'm going to go through the important changes. And there are not many. It won't take much longer, I promise. So the first is that in definition number 48 under Liberty School Funding Advisory Committee, which is a committee that's established under this agreement consisting of one school district board member, one city council member, and one member of the development team, i.e. Lewis, will sit as a 3-member board that essentially vote on details relating to the school build, to the financing plans, and then there's conceptions of their ability to recommend things after the school is fully funded with any excess dollars that may remain in those bond accounts. What we did in that, or what was done in that edit was it just simply clarified that the only 3 voting members are those 3 I mentioned. Myself and Carrie or other staff may also attend, and will just provide administrative support and technical support if needed. So that was just a clarification. The section 4.6, levy of special taxes. One of the things the council discussed was there's a 2% escalator that's built into many of these kinds of things to keep up with rising cost. And what's really important to understand is that when you go out to the market to get bonds, they assess your unit counts, how much you intend on charging, and then the escalation is part of that. So the loan, for lack of a better term, that you're getting is based on what escalation you have in your formation documents. And if at one time there was discussion about whether or not the city council could tweak and change that midstream, and that does affect the ability to borrow to reimburse for all the cost of the subdivision and also the school. However, in talking with the other parties, they did think it was reasonable that once school facilities have been fully funded and all related obligations repaid, and when the final series of bonds in the improvement area have been repaid, the city does have discretion, or council will have discretion, that they can request that the CMFA, which is the instrument we're using to pull these bonds, can reduce or eliminate that annual escalation of special taxes within the improvement area. So it's really important that council mentioned this a number of times. It's really important that we at least have the option later, because we have a lot of CFDs in Lincoln that we would say these days are not formed the way we would have liked, that don't provide us the ability or the tools to release taxpayers once all those obligations are paid. So that was part 1. Part 2 is the most complex and difficult portion, which is surplus special taxes. Thanks, Dave. Which is surplus special taxes are, think of it, surplus special taxes and pay-go. The best way to think about that is additional dollars that may be left over from either savings or refinancings that occur over a long period of time, 30 to 45 years. And sometimes those dollars can be significant especially as you reach sort of the end of some of the financial obligations of a project. And so, of course, there was a lot of debate about who should have rights to that and how they should be used. And in a public setting where all your resources are constrained, there's a lot of motivation to make sure that you're trying to see if you can't get a little extra to build that extra thing you need, or that public safety facility you may want, or that addition to a park. And what council said is, look, this agreement is designed, and what we've all agreed to fully fund the K8, TK8. After that, it's fine if this committee would like to vote on ideas on how to spend those monies, but the council should have authority to make that final decision. Once the school thing is complete, the deal's not done, but our ability to make all of the administrative and executive decisions about those taxes should be the city council's alone. There's a lot of debate about how we do that. Let me just read one specific section that I think is really important. First of all, you'll notice that under surplus special taxes, it's really clear that the first priorities for any of those excess dollars that may remain is to go towards whatever may remain a financial burden for the school facility. And when I use that term, it's a broad, obtuse term, but it means the TK through 8 in the definition section, not anything else. So that's 1. 2 is to pay administrative expenses as defined in the financing document, and then there's a reserve fund that has to be replenished. It's usually a bond requirement. Usually financiers will not allow you to collect just enough to pay off your debt. They require you to have a certain amount of reserve in there in the event that, the subdivision goes belly up or people stop paying their property taxes. You want to at least have some safety net. So those are what we would call the first tier priorities. Beyond that, in no particular order, public safety, facilities, infrastructure. We've talked about it here at council. We are already there, but we are going to badly need what I would call a real public safety facility, a police station / fire administrative station. It gives the ability for reimbursement of the city contribution towards that $500 per door so that we can recoup some of those monies if possible. There's an option in there for the committee to consider other school improvements. And then perhaps most importantly is early retirement of outstanding bonds. So it's possible that you get to the end of this process and there's X millions of dollars left, and the council makes a business decision that, hey, we could do all this other stuff, but what we think the right thing to do is let's pay off the debt that exists and let's eliminate or reduce the tax to the taxpayer. So that would be called surplus tax second priority. Okay. Then there was this, in the original document, there was this complicated dispute resolution part, which talked a lot about what if the committee doesn't agree and how do we get through that? And there was mediation provisions and it was complex. In the subsequent discussions with the other parties on the agreement, it was agreed that if the city council is going to get authority after the period is ended, then why have a dispute process? Because at the end of the day, like many cases, you all are the final decision makers. So you'll see that that has been deleted. And what you see is subsection 3, which is city council override of surplus special tax second priority. So under this agreement, the way it's structured is the committee could meet and say, hey, we think it'd be a great idea if you had funded this. And the city council then, within 30 days, would take that matter up and would either say sure or no, and then the decision's final. So it gives the city council administrative authority thereafter to do whatever you'd like with the remainder of those funds. But it still keeps the collaborative kind of mechanism intact, which we thought was sort of important. That section is not the last portion, but that's the most important one. The last one, which I'll go through quickly, is I talked about those 2 city contributions. What you see in the document, we had this sort of similar problem. The school district wanted commitment in the document that we were going to add those other contributions. We said, sure, but we want a joint use agreement that is going to be suitable to us. They said, okay, but we can't do that prior to this agreement getting done. And we need some sort of commitment so that we can show our full funding strategy to the state. How do we make that work? What I had originally written was that it wasn't activated until we do a joint use, because what I didn't want is the city to be in breach and Christine having to go defend us in court because we couldn't get to an agreement on joint use. So what we did instead was we said that once the park is operational and available for joint use, then those other financial contributions can activate. We would not be able to use the facility without a joint use agreement. So it sort of requires that the city and school district get that done. Sorry. And there's also a provision at the very end of that section that requires that we will get that completed within 12 months. And, compared to how complex and difficult this one has been, I'm hoping that that's an easier process. I think it will be. And the other thing that I'll point to you, which is really important that the school district included, was we were playing out, it's sad that you have to do this, but you do. Well, what happens if we just don't agree and we don't get to a joint use and we end up kind of in some sort of legal setting trying to sort this out? The school district included some language that made it clear that the intent of joint use is to provide us proportional use of those facilities based on the significant contribution that we're making to have those facilities built. So if we were legally battling it out, it would at least give a judge some baseline to say, okay, well, the city's, offering $200,000 per year plus this $1.5 million in fees, and what's a reasonable proportionality. That's the worst case, and on no level will we get there. But a lot of these kinds of contractual things are about trying to get yourself into a place of protection for the worst case scenario. So if approved, what I can tell you is we may take 60, 90 days off just to give ourselves a little break from all of this, but we will get right back into a room and start negotiating a joint use after that. I was joking with Carrie that I'm not really looking forward to it, and I'm sure that she's not either, but we're going to do it. And this has been a good process because as tough as it's been, it's really forced us to think about things from each other's perspectives a little more. So those are the key issues. Those are the key edits. I'm sorry it took so long to get through it, but as Christine can tell you, it's been a lot of time on our end to get this done. And we hope that what this serves as is a really unique and exciting model that other places can use, and we may try to employ in other areas where we have problems with getting schools built, like other villages that have struggled to get there too. So that's the general report, and happy to hear feedback and direction from all of you and questions.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, any comments? Go ahead.
4.6. So the reduction happens after the final bonds that have been issued have been repaid. If the bonds can last no more than 30 years and the whole thing is 45 years, it seems to me that there would be no situation where this would actually come to pass. Because once the bonds are paid off, the CFD is done, right? Isn't it when the last bonds are issued or the last bonds are paid? Because if the last bonds are paid, the CFD is done.
Yeah, I think that it's both, right? So once they're paid off, some CFDs continue to collect money for, other uses that were identified in the CFD, other claims that come in for reimbursable items. We wanted to make sure that it existed in both capacities so that to the extent that you could do it. But what we've been told is the risk is, unless it's very tight language, which has been looked at here, we put ourselves in a position where our ability to borrow is reduced proportionally if we can fiddle with it before you're at the end. If that makes sense, I hope.
Yeah, I guess I just don't see a scenario where you're collecting any taxes after the last bond of the last improvement area has been paid. Why would you still be collecting taxes if you paid all the debt?
Of course, this question came up on the one night in like 3 years where Nita is not present. She's literally never missed a meeting, I don't think. Wait, Nita, are you on? She might be online. Is she online? Oh.
Oh, and she
Got her
just
hand
raised
up.
her hand.
There you go. Thank you, Nita. Sorry about what I just said about you.
Go ahead, Nita.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So you're still collecting taxes when the bonds are paid off to, like Sean said, the PAYGO and the surplus tax, well, the PAYGO really, to continue the remaining uses allowed within the CFD. Council has the decision after the bonds are paid off, or has the opportunity after the bonds are paid off, to request that CMFA reduce or stop collecting the tax at that point. You could continue it, right? You could say, well, we want to continue to collect taxes for a public safety center, or we want to continue to collect taxes because the school district has asked us for more money to do a thing, whatever that thing is. You have that option, you have that ability. And that's regardless of whether you keep that language in this agreement, that language will exist in the CFD that's being formed by CMFA.
So how does the 45 years play into that? Does that mean that if there's a 30-year bond, that there could be up to 15 more years of taxes, and then you have to stop?
Not necessarily. When a bond is refunded, there's naturally an extension of time by a small amount. But even though that there's an extension of time, there's a calculation done to determine that the overall tax being paid by the homeowner would be less as a result of the refunding, that there's enough savings in the interest amount included in the bond that even though it's a longer period of time, it's still saving them money at a lower amount.
Okay. Because there was a provision in a previous draft that said that any refunding couldn't extend the total length of the bond.
Yeah, refunding naturally extends the total length by just a little bit.
But it's not years.
It's not necessarily years.
Okay. Because I'm just trying to get an understanding about how much after you've paid the bonds back, homeowners could be taxed. Because my original feeling of it is that, okay, once you've paid the bonds back, the reason you had the 30-year cap and the 45 was to give the time for the project to finish. And then homeowners were done with the tax, which is where this raised my question. Like, well, if you can't reduce the escalation until after you've paid all the bonds, how many more taxes could there possibly be? I don't have my head around that.
Well, remember that the series of bonds will be different depending on the hold in many different time periods for different types of uses. It may be that Lewis and the school district align on a request for a new series of bonds because they both need reimbursement roughly around the same time, but it may not stagger that way. And need to jump in if I'm screwing this up, it's possible. But the reason why the language is in there is that we wanted, to the extent that it still exists, or you're in a period of that small period of time thereafter, we wanted to give, to the extent there's some flexibility, the option at least to council to do that in the event that you may. You may not need to. It may be after the period of time there is no more debt and therefore there is no more need for the CFD. It also, what we're trying to do, I was talking about this with Phil earlier, is we're trying to see into the future 30 to 45 years and account for all of these different variables that may occur in that period of time. And so could something change in between now and then? Some new need come forward or an amendment to this agreement? We wanted language in there that at least gave the opportunity for that to occur, even if it's unlikely.
Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed to the language. I just it brought up this idea that the homeowners could be paying more than 30 years, which was not something I had held in my head.
No, and in fact, I agree with you. And there's language in another section of the agreement that's explicit about it's a 45-year total term, but no series of bonds can have any time period that extends beyond the 30 years. So the 45 years exists because there's multiple improvement areas that we'll annex in later. The actual debt is a 30-year debt.
Yeah, exactly.
Questions
Nice. Getting close to being a bond expert.
Okay. All right, let's open up for public comment. Anybody in the room have a comment on this item? Go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Phil Rodriguez with the Lewis Group of Companies, and all of you know me well enough that I can talk a long time, but I just can't beat that. So Sean did a fantastic job of summarizing it. But what we'll say is, prior to bringing in the city to this discussion we first had with the school district, I challenged my finance team to find every source of funding possible to help construct the school in our world of developer financing. And if it meant taking dollars away from us that we would normally seek, let's talk about it. Let's put it all on the table and figure this out, because it's not uncommon for developers and school districts in California to have a very contentious relationship. And with Western Placer, we've had challenging times. But I can tell you right now that the bright light came on when I finally asked the Superintendent Carrie Callahan and her team, do you really want to get serious about trying to find a way to fund and construct the school within Village 7, which is now called Liberty at Lincoln, in case everybody was curious. But and she said, sure, let's do it. And that challenged us all. And from that point forward, I knew we had hope. And what I told them is that at some point in time, the goal here is to come to an agreement on a facilities agreement for the school and bring in the city as well as a partner with that. And because we all collectively, all three parties want, the same thing. Wholesome communities, public safety, parks, recreation, schools, retail, shopping, all of those things. And we can all be a part of it. So Carrie was a big part of this. She's not here right now. She's doing something more fun, which she should be doing. But without her to start with, we wouldn't be here today. And without your city manager and your city attorney, we wouldn't be here today. I've discussed this with a lot of you. we've become more better friends about this. So it's been healthy and good, and we're looking forward to it. And you can trust that when it comes to the joint use agreement, they might be napping for a few months, but I'm going to be finding out, well, when are we going to get that done? So I'll be with you and driving the truck to get this agreement taken care of. Because it's a part of the equation to get the city on board to help fund the school. You know, give the city something out of it. And so it's important. I know the school district, according to what they told me, and I believe them, is that as soon as this agreement is officially agreed upon, tonight perhaps, they're going to get started on design. And so we're going to be a part of that design effort, managing the design, managing the costs, which the district in prior school developments have done a great job with being very efficient with their dollars. So I'm not worried about that, but we'll be a part of the equation. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, I told myself I wouldn't talk long, and Sean made sure I didn't, so thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else? Any other public comment? Anybody on Zoom? Nope. Okay, I'll bring it back. Any other? Yeah.
So one, I want to compliment the team because much of what we talked about 2 weeks ago has been incorporated. There are three kind of small technical things that I think still remain that need to be tightened up. One is a clear delineation for when the surplus special taxes shift from the committee to the city council. I think council had mentioned something about a notice of completion is a good benchmark for that. The second is being clear that the city council, when that trigger happens, can certainly take up recommendations of the committee at that point, but also can act on its own independently on those foreign funds after the trigger. And then the third thing is that the committee work in a unanimous way, which I had mentioned before 2 weeks ago. I think we can get those three things. I think it helps us a little bit with some taxpayer protection. And then kind of clears up some ambiguity in the current language. But otherwise, I'm in full support with those amendments. Thanks.
I think what we want to do with that is if we have specific wording that Christine can do right now, and we just approve with those changes, because I think what we're trying to avoid, and again, if there's real concerns, that's one thing, but I think we've worked through this enough already.
Yeah. I don't need to do actual amendments. I think if there's consensus that those three things can be incorporated, I'm good.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good.
And council can do it.
Because what staff has requested is we want to make changes, specific language, change it, and then approve it.
If council is comfortable, and we've done this many times on, forever tax sharing agreements is one memory I have, is if you approve it, we would recommend you approve it with the provision that you allow the city attorney to make those specific textual edits that she has notated. And then we will you approve that document kind of in advance, and we'll deliver that final version to the school district. And just because I want to be really clear, because it's important that's on the record, because these things always come up later. So just to go through them again really fast. One, unanimous decision on any matters from the committee, which was discussed and nodded at the workshop meeting. The second is that the bright line of when the school facilities are complete, the logical time is when they issue notice of completion, file one, which is essentially saying your project's done and can be used now. And then the third is
And the third was that the city council has the right to act independently after the notice of completion, that bright line, and is not reliant upon a recommendation from the committee.
That satisfy what you're?
Yep, 100%.
Anybody have any problems with that or any concerns with that?
I have no problem with it, and I just would like to commend staff for working through this process. It's been a long time. Councilmember Reedy has really been point on this, but this has been a complex negotiation, and I think it shows what good people can do collaboratively to bring a project together that's going to benefit not just that particular project, but the community as a larger organization.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add, I didn't say in the report was, there's something that Councilmember Reedy said to me that has really stuck with me over this time period, which is there's this problem that the school district and city would probably both agree to, which is that we haven't always trusted one another. And it's weird because we collaborate on all kinds of things. This building is a collaboration with the school district. And one of the things he said to me was, we just have to get past that. Today is the best day we start trusting each other. I don't think I said that quite right, but essentially that. And I think it is. We're going to be able to look back on this agreement and say, hey, when it was really important, we got together and made it happen. We're not, hopefully people will not be waiting 20 years to use the TK through 8. It'll be the first couple phases of this project, we hope.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I make one comment?
You sure can.
I just wanted to add that there's several community members that have told me that they really would appreciate the opportunity to have access to some of the school grounds as part of when they were younger, they were like, oh, let's go play at the playground, and playgrounds happen to be right at the school level. So allowing the community to come together with the city and the school district could have said it any better than quoted by John.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that again, thank you. I know how much time and energy that all of the parties put into this agreement, and just us, I think, coming in the 11th hour out of this whole process was a lot. And it took a lot of patience at the end, I think, and I appreciate. I never felt like anybody was getting impatient with us. You took the time, all parties, to make sure that we understood and went over all the details and helped us understand bond math, which was not easy. And so thank you. And I really appreciate Louis for being so great in doing, going above and beyond the extra miles of what a normal developer and development legally is required to do. It means so much. And we will be grateful for years and years, and always let everybody know that that was a big part of how this came to be. And we've already told the school district, but just to say it again, that this is a new day. We very much value education in our community and want to be a collaborative partner. And I don't for a second think that this wasn't a really great creative plan to make this the most it could be in being a K through 8. And Carrie Callahan, our superintendent, told us at our last meeting workshop that there's actually a lot of benefits to the K through 8 program for kids developmentally and socially developmentally. So I'm excited to see this happen, and I love the name, and I'm glad to be wrapping this up.
So would they.
Not as glad as you.
I wish I could tell you to take a week off right now, but you got other things to do. I'm just
Nope.
kidding. No,
No
I
rest for
would
the
agree with
weary.
all that. It's sometimes we have to do hard things. But when you get through it, you have something really great at the end of it. And I will also reiterate that since I've been on the council, I've dealt with lots of different developers and lots of different philosophies. And one of the things that we needed to get away from was, allowing developers to come in and just, do what they wanted and walk away and leave Lincoln holding, a lot of responsibility and, not nice houses, but like parks not built, other problems. And what I've always appreciated about Phil and Louis is that they do the work. They do the community outreach. They go the extra mile. They really care about the communities that they're building, but also leaving Lincoln a better place, not just getting theirs and getting out. And so can't say that about all developers, but we can say that about Phil and Louis Planned Communities. And so I really appreciate that. It's where Lincoln's better for it, and appreciate Carrie and her team. And again, Councilmember Reedy taking the lead on this. I said last council meeting, or no, after our workshop, that, this council is great because, not that past councils were, but everyone has their niche, everyone has their strong points, and we're working really well with that. And so it's good for me to be able to just know that, we're all in the process, but John was in the weeds and trusted his lead on that. And we all have those moments. And so it's great collaboration, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And I really appreciate that. So it's time to get this thing done. So we'll take a motion to approve.
And I think that John should make the motion.
Yeah, I'm not gonna take it. It's all you.
And the second.
Yeah. Just want to thank our new partners at the Lewis family and Phil and school board. And my line Sean referred to was the best time for our partnership would have been 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. I move to adopt the resolution with the 3 amendments.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Reedy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Pearl.
Yes.
Councilmember Eklund.
Yes.
Mayor Andriata.
Yes. All right,
All right.
congratulations.
Go get him, Phil.
All right, thank you, everybody. All right, hey, you want to do city manager reports or are you done?
I promised I'd give one and then I'll let it go. One really cool piece of news that was unexpected that Vin is responsible for is if you know anything about the McBean Bridge expansion project, it has been a pain in the rear end. It has gone on for over a decade. Bridge builds, especially funded through the highway bridge program, are just really tough. They require a lot of environmental, and especially the bridge we're building, expanding in that area is a very sensitive habitat. There's waterway conditions, there's flooding issues. I mean, it's a whole thing. And what we were operating under the assumption, well, actually the direction that we were likely going to have to redo a lot of our environmental that had previously been approved out there, which we were going to bring you an item tonight to try to supplement that budget with $200,000 additional to redo a bunch of environmental that we'd already done. Very frustrating. But Vin, through speaking with reps at Caltrans and kind of being just in their ear a lot, we got a blessing. The Caltrans district that represents our area notified him that they have cleared the project from an environmental perspective, and now we can move to acquiring some right-of-way and eventually construction. So a huge deal, because now instead of just talking about the bridge project, it actually could be a bridge project. So just want to thank him and take the wins where you get them, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Awesome. Thank you, Vin. Appreciate that. All right, council initiated business. Any business? Any committee reports?
I do. Through PCTPA, just a reminder that we had approved funding for initial design for the toll road on 65 South, which would essentially take and bypass pretty much all of the traffic from, I think it starts at Whitney Ranch and then goes down past, all the way down to 80. They were looking at maybe having one additional merge into that toll road from Blue Oaks to try to get through to the 80. But essentially, what that'll allow us to do is collect those funds for the additional improvements on 65. But with that being a toll road, that can help leverage some dollars for some additional federal funding. So we said, yeah, go ahead and let's get the initial design going.
Had our lab lac meeting on the 7th, and it was a little bit somber, depressing, somber. I don't know what you want to say, but sadly, there's been a loss of more funding, mainly the IMLS funding. It's the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services, and it's about $15.9 million in California. That is going to sadly affect our library with our adult tutoring and literature program. It's one-on-one, some professional training and skills, Policy Map, which is a data analysis tool for services and decisions that we make at the library, and the new hold lockers. Local grants that covered 100% of the teen internship that we just wrapped up. That was here, I think, the last meeting or 2 meetings ago. And then NewYorkTimes.com, Palace Project, the Braille and Talking Book Library staff hours. The ask is for residents and electeds to contact our U.S. senators and ask for this to be renewed and advocate on behalf of the California Library Association and the American Library Association. Then also there was an ongoing, there's a presentation by a consulting agency called Constructive Disruption. And that was very informative and basically did a deep dive on what they see as an overall view of library funding and services, recommendations, and things to start looking at filling our funding gaps. Mainly it was to see if we can find a new collaborative partner, funding partner to increase our revenue and replace Sierra College and their funding that has gone away as well. Other than that, it was our library is doing an amazing job with the skeleton staff that they have, and what they've done is phenomenal, as well as the volunteers through the Friends of the Lincoln Library. And they've asked us or recommended that we look into our village general plan and see if that's something that we can take some suggestions from. And is there anything I'm missing? I'll let Catherine, she's the expert.
No, that sounds like a good summary. Absolutely. Yeah. And then the Library Advisory Board was very interested in the village plan, as you were saying, right at the end there, in terms of what direction that might have in terms of long-term library planning.
Great. Thank you. So that's an ongoing in progress work to find some new creative ideas to jumpstart and reinvent our library and keep it because we love it. Tomorrow is EDC, and then we also have a very important budget meeting for LAFCO at 3. That is a subcommittee meeting that's going to dive into explaining to all of our cities our upcoming budget, how our costs and fundings are allocated and why the costs are going up a little bit. And that's also available on Zoom. And then I'm attending on Friday in Modesto, a Cal LAFCO meeting at 10.
Okay, great.
This coming Thursday, the Pioneer Community Energy will hold their monthly board meeting, and we'll be looking at the budget for the next year. I'm on the Finance and Audit Committee. We had a preview of it yesterday, and so I'll be reporting back on that at the next council meeting.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything?
Oh, and then we also have a airport committee meeting next week.
All right. Okay. I just have a little bit of a review of the Cap to Cap trip that I was just on last week. Normally I just do transportation team. Well, actually, I didn't go last year, but the year before, I actually participated on transportation, air quality, and then they pulled me into like water and like wildfire stuff. So I got to do a lot. But this time, because I'm new on SACOG, I did the transportation team, and then I tag teamed on public safety. So I flew out early to do the transportation tour of the DC area, mainly in Virginia, and we toured several little cities right there. And one of the interesting things that we saw, which is really cool because we're getting that right across the street over here with Taylor Builders building, is the model of commercial underneath and then residential living on top. And we saw several buildings like that were designed very well. And so several of them had like big grocery stores underneath and other little, salons or that kind of thing. And then they had all residential. And so that model works really well out there. One of the other things that they had was a lot of apartment buildings, just a lot of high density. And so, that's not necessarily working for us, but lots of different models out there. But so the transportation tour was very interesting, very informative. And then the very first day of meetings was Monday, Kevin Kiley, and spoke a lot about public safety, passing a Prop 36, that sort of thing. And what's interesting is they're talking about things in other parts of the state, and our DA is behind me with public safety, and we're like waiting for them to talk about like, no, we've been doing that for a long time and everyone else is just catching up. And so even though we didn't quite get the, recognition that we should have, it was everybody in the room knew what was happening. So that was kind of good. But they get along and they talked about, just how they're pushing for, more public safety and that sort of thing. And then the meetings that I went on, so the first day I did get to do a public safety meeting with Congressman Kevin Kiley, with him in his office and a large part of our team. And I actually got to help lead that meeting. And I took the part on emerging technology, but our 3 asks were for, and we always do this for public safety, keeping the request for funding in front of them for personnel and training. So like the SAFER grant, the COPS grant, that sort of thing. And it was interesting because, everybody has paid attention to what's going on in the national government. Everyone's kind of like in this holding pattern, like we're going to wait to see what happens. Everything has been pulled back, all the funding's been cut. For example, in transportation side, Rockland was supposed to get 3 million for their road thing. Loomis was supposed to get $1 million for their Horseshoe Bar Road. Well, all of that's gone away. So we're still asking for that, but everyone is very, and depending what side you listen to, their takes are a little different, but it's all kind of uncertain because they're not sure how it's going to shake out, but the message was most like, well, they've cut back, but then once they evaluate everything, then they'll start reinstating. So it was just interesting, kind of, listening to the 2 different perspectives. But in the public safety meeting, so the grant funding was requested, and then also funding and resources for mental health services for public safety, which is really important. And then I shared on the need for legislation for emerging technology. And I actually did this 2 years ago. We've been asking for this for a while. And if I miss something, both chiefs can speak up. But one of the problems that we have is with the unmanned, aircraft, the drones, we do not have the jurisdiction locally that if there is a fire or a crime incident, or we need to find somebody who's missing and we deploy our drones, if there's a resident who is a hobbyist or whatever, and they have their drones up, we can't make them take it down, which means we can't fly ours. We can go to them and say, could you please take your drone down, but we can't make them. And it makes it hard for the public safety staff to do what they need to do. And I gave examples of, in fire situations, looking for suspects that don't put officers in jeopardy right away. Rockland had a story of a man with Alzheimer's got lost, and they found him right away with the drone. So there's lots of stories that we could tell. So asking for, could we have some legislation that gives us local authority over the airspace? And then one of the lesser requests was that we had time to throw in there was that there is a ban on Chinese-made drones right now. And so until there's a way to, there's some confusion. Okay, so we're not buying any more of those, but can we use the ones we already have? Like, what does the ban cover? And could we have relief from that until other sources are able to be secured for those, equipment? And so Congressman Kiley was very, engaged in that conversation with all of it, and said he would do what he could to continue that funding. So it was a really good conversation for that. And then the next day I had all the transportation meetings. We met with the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on the minority side. And that was one of the interesting, conversations. And so, they're just waiting to see how funding is going to be. But we shared our concerns with 80, 65 and other regional. We had a really nice flyer from SACOG regional projects, or actually PCTPA to Matt Clicks led several of those meetings, and got to do a lot of work with him. And then we went to the 2 Nevada senators, Cortez Masto and Rosen. And it was really interesting because we walked in there and we only thought we were meeting with one, and the other one staff showed up because they wanted to do it together. And they were very, very engaged, very accommodating. And what came out of that meeting was they want to set up a Zoom call with Matt Click, Kevin Kiley, and those 2 Nevada senators because, we share 80. And so there could be some collaboration and some combined dollars to improve that. So that was very productive. We also met with Kevin's staff on transportation. And then we met with Congressman Ami Bera himself. And that was a fun meeting because we only talked for about 5 minutes and then he talked for the rest of the time because he had a lot to say. But he's concerned about transportation too. So I felt overall that the advocacy was productive this time. They really listened. They were, sometimes you get staff members who are just like, okay, thanks. And why are you here? And what's your team? But everyone was very engaged, was very productive. They're all very concerned. And so a lot of what we're doing is just kind of waiting to see how it's all going to shake out. But we're still pushing forward. We have needs and we want you to listen to us. So yeah, so it's good.
Thank you for being a squeaky wheel at
Yeah.
a minimum.
Yeah.
I know you did a lot more than that, but transportation is something that we
Yeah.
all are
Yeah.
very concerned about. And I love that they're getting involved in Nevada as well. That's awesome.
We were very excited about that. And so Matt is going to follow up. And so I'm sure we'll hear about that later. And so, yeah. And I feel fortunate too that we have Matt with PCTPA because he's on it. He's already, as Ben said, they're already coming up with solutions since Measure B didn't pass. He's working on funding $25 million to do that, the toll road thing. And I guess the toll road is kind of a stopgap, right? It may not stay, it may stay, but it's to try to get us to the big project that we need to get done. But he's already been working on it. So even though Measure B didn't pass, we have a harder road to get there, but I think we'll get there with his work and just, we had a really great transportation team. Oh, and public safety was great too. I always like working with those guys.
Back to the drones. Where are our drones from? Are they from China? Is there any complexity with ours and whatever's-
So everybody was buying, well, most people were buying from China when they became a thing in public safety. As of this year, I gave direction to staff to no longer purchase Chinese-made drones, and we're buying from other sources and as close to home as possible. So they cost 3 times as much, but it is what it is.
Worry about,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, great.
Not going to have a negative impact on what we already have.
Yeah.
Good.
Good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. Okay, any information items?
I think I did. National Police Week.
Yes.
Hello, we're all wearing blue and black to honor our law enforcement and our PD that we absolutely appreciate so much. We wouldn't live here if it wasn't a safe place to be. And we appreciate you. I wanted to ask really quick for an update on the Sierra College light and 12 Bridges and Sierra College. Is there any updates on that happening?
Yeah, some good updates. So we've heard from the county that they now have moved a little bit and are interested in accelerating the Sierra College and 12 Bridges intersection. What we're hearing is that they kind of want to bookend that with an intersection they'd like to see at 193 in Sierra College, which is actually Caltrans territory. My perspective, or at least right now, is that we'd really like to see, that's fine, but priority for us at least is 12 Bridges. We do have some dollars in our PFE program that can go towards contribution towards that intersection, and then thanks to Matt and Ben, it is a Sparta project which can be reimbursed under that program as well. So it's not like there's no options. There seems to be plenty of options to accelerate it, and so we're going to stay on it to make sure that we've even explored collaborating on being lead agency to try to really get that moving.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's probably what we should do.
Yeah, I was just a little concerned that adding in the 193 and Sierra College and Caltrans is going to extend our timeline longer than necessary, and is
Look,
that going to put us back to where we
I
started?
just gave Caltrans a big kudo for the bridge thing, so I don't want to but I will say that I think it's likely that it will not improve the project schedule to add that in.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? No? Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.